So I'd like to bring up our next panel discussion, Sustaining Explosive Growth Through Customer Obsession. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic. You know, we're at this conference, we're talking a lot about how to manage higher customer acquisition costs. And then on the other side, we're talking a lot about customer experience and retention because when it costs more to bring the customers in, you want to make sure that you're getting them to shop and shop again with you. So understanding your customers and delivering great customer experiences is a key lever in delivering loyalty and engendering loyalty. And as we all know, customer expectations are just getting higher and higher. So we have a great session that's going to delve into that topic. So I'd like to bring up our speakers, Brenda Freeman. She's Chief Brand Officer at Wunderkind. With her are Daren Hull, President of Vera Bradley, and Andrea Moore, who's SVP Digital E-commerce and Consumer Insights at Nest New York.
How's everybody? We're right before lunch, so I think we need to make sure we're very lively. But I have to say, this conversation and certainly the number of prep calls that we've had about this topic, there's a lot of passion around it, and hopefully you guys will feel the same, and we have enough time for some good Q&A. So first of all, just wanted to say thank you again for the warm introductions, and thank you to Commerce Next for allowing us to be a part of this panel. And so I'm Brenda Freeman, and I am Chief Brand Officer at Wunderkind. For those that don't know, Wunderkind is a marketing performance engine that helps a lot of great brands like these two, as a matter of fact. So they're friends of Wunderkind. And I get the pleasure to be able to, to ask some really great questions of these two fabulous leaders. And so let me introduce my panelists. So on my left, I have Andrea Moore, who is, I want to make sure I get your title right, Senior Vice President of Digital E-commerce and Consumer Insights. Please welcome Andrea Moore. And to her left, I have Daren Hull, who is the president of Vera Bradley. Welcome, Daren.
Thank you.
So let's kind of like warm this up a little bit. And first of all, Andrea and Daren, hopefully what you could do is just give us a little bit about who you are, your career path and how you got to your respective companies, and just a little bit about what the company where you guys are right now.
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Moore, and I have been launching and building e-commerce businesses within omnichannel organizations and scaling them profitably for the last 20 years or so. I'm rounding down tiny bits, 20 years. And currently I'm at Nest, which is, we are a home fragrance, fine fragrance, and fragrance technology company. And we sell through direct-to-consumer and also many other channels like Sephora, Nordstrom, Amazon, et cetera.
I'm Daren Hull. I gave a breakout session yesterday where I asked people to raise their hand if they were in the e-commerce market in 2000. I was like one of two people that raised their hand, so I've been around for a while. I've worked at really big companies, really small companies. I work at Vera Bradley now, which is the 4th largest handbag and accessory company here in the US. I came in as the Chief Customer Officer, responsible for marketing, sales, customer data, customer service, all those sorts of things. And then was moved up to President of the brand, responsible for sort of everything during the pandemic, and have carried on with that role. So really appreciate you all taking the time. I know it's midday. And there's like a really wide span. It may not feel that way, but from this stage, I'm like, okay, I'll keep. It's not that I have like a tick. I'm going to try to hit everybody.
That's great. Well, while you're still talking, Daren, I'm going to go right to you, and let's get right into it because these guys have some really great nuggets to share with you. So, as it relates to customer obsession, and certainly post-pandemic. We're all marketers in the room. We've all heard the tropes of acceleration and how the customers are king and how that just absolutely became table stakes, post-pandemic. So we talk a lot about personalization in our prep session and the fact that there's some very interesting ways of approaching that in a way of using that as a lever to really lean in on customer obsession. And so would you like to sort of tell us a little bit about how you're doing that at Vera Bradley?
Yep. So For anybody who hasn't seen me speak, I try to do the like keep it simple, stupid. I think it's hard, especially if you've been out at dinners and events, to like take really tangible notes that you can take away with you. I think for somebody who's been around the industry, we've been talking about one-to-one personalization for like as long as I've been in the workforce, which is a long time. And I would say there's a lot of software that's gotten good at doing optimization, probably more than personalization. And that's an important piece to set aside. I think there's the sort of batch and blast where we've all gotten better at these big, broad outbound communications where we're saying smarter things to our customers with really nice tools that help us be a little more dynamic with the components of text and emails. I spent a lot of time talking about the one-to-many relationship, and that's in between the two. And the idea is, what's the larger group of people that you can talk with and talk about? So really know who your customer is. And I don't mean know who your customer is. Like, I don't know that I've ever worked for a brand that didn't say a 25 to 35-year-old woman was part of the brand. Like, 35-year-old woman is probably 90% of the overlap here. But take a moment to get out and do foundational stuff like a mood board that's like, who's our customer? What are they looking at? What's the media they're consuming? What are the other brands that they like? Where do they shop? How do they shop? These sorts of things, because I think it's important that I thought Farmer's Dog and Eden did a really nice job yesterday of talking about when you're really going out and acquiring, you need to get some critical mass behind what you're doing. So sometimes it's better to be narrower and deeper than it is wide, and it's really difficult to go deep unless you're being really, really, really specific. So really take that time, talk to the merchants, talk to everybody in your organization who has a viewpoint, take what you think is good, fit it into a board, and really talk about it in the organization so everybody knows where you're going in a direction, and then start building campaigns that are based on that one-to-many. So at our place, we have a very specific customer who's newly married, newly has kids, and has a very specific lifestyle that's not urban, it's a little bit more suburban. And we have a whole series of campaigns that go against that specific target. And that's been really helpful in the pandemic to just get people's mind wrapped against one simple mission. Now we have multiples of these, but start with one and work out from there.
Got it. How about you, Andrea?
I mean, I think to sort of put a fine point on it, it's taking all the technology that we do have, that we have been waiting for and listening about, and like it's been on the way for so long, and I think the data and the technology really exist now to be able to create personalized experiences. And so how do you marry that with the right content, the right messaging at the right time? And I think it's really a blending of the art and science of the technology and the team and talent and what you really know about the consumer, and pulling those two things together to make a compelling message. So
I like that. I love the art and science. I just want to plus one on that and sort of ask the question to either one of you guys. I remember seeing some studies that said post-pandemic that a large number of consumers, their overall point of view about their mission and their purpose in life, those things that they value, there were a number of significant changes. And so I'm just kind of curious, in general, did you find that the profile of who your best customers are, do you feel like any of those things changed post-pandemic that would be worthy to share with the audience? If not, that's fine, but I was just kind of curious about that.
I mean, I think for Nest, we put on a lot of new customers during the pandemic because a lot of people were home, and so they're using Scent as a way to break up their day, to differentiate their work time from their family time or their personal time. Wellness is a big category that we've leaned into during the pandemic as well. And so it's really about how do we now take those new customers who learned about the brand during the pandemic and continue to be part of their lives as we sort of ease out of this pandemic. We use a data source called NPD, which does a lot of study of the fragrance market, and they said that consumers incorporated this into their lifestyle during the pandemic, and they don't see that changing going forward because now it's part of their everyday. So
that's great. Anything from you, Dan?
I think we all went through the process, and even walking around New York. So I moved away from New York, but I was here basically up until the pandemic, and I think it's funny, people are dressing more the same, and I saw a lot of people, like guys going to work wearing like jogger pants and t-shirts, which probably wasn't the thing before the pandemic. What I would loop it back to is even once you define who your customer is, just being very, I think the customer is changing very dramatically right now. And just keep in mind, what is it you're trying to get out of the customer? So what types of products are you expecting them to buy, and what are they buying? What sort of lifetime value and loyalty are you expecting, and is that changing? Very simple things of like, what do you expect is going to happen and what happens? And I would underscore, like, share that with the organization because it's important. It's a team effort, these things. I think when things were, stores were closed and you were trying to grow e-commerce, it wasn't hard. But I would imagine, like Andrea, when everybody's at home, now you talk about what types of fragrances are people using in their home versus somewhere else. That's going to evolve. Then you need to work with product development and the merchants and all these sorts of things to evolve to kind of keep your acquisition, keep your retention moving in the right direction. So I think we're always having a touch base with, like, travel's on fire right now, but we're seeing a shift back to like domestic travel and stuff that fits in the car more than stuff on planes. That's just as plane tickets have gotten expensive, we see that shifting. But that's because our teams are just looking for that to happen. And it's not, talk about your bad information just as well as your good information. That's how you find the things.
Yeah, I like that. So let's continue to talk about the lifetime value in general, because clearly that is another important lever as it relates to driving customer obsession. And so are there any interesting sort of playbooks, Andrea, that you're doing at Nest that would be interesting for the group to hear in terms of how you're driving lifetime value? How do you approach it? How do you define it? And are there any like best practices there that you could share?
I mean, at Nest, we're very fortunate because what we sell is, you can enjoy like at any stage of your life, and it's also we have a very high gifting kind of quotient as part of the brand. I've spent a lot of my career in fashion, and that is very different and can be a very short cycle. So when we think about lifetime value, we actually have a pretty tight definition, and we look at it over a 3-year period, just to kind of keep the math together. But there's a lot of opportunity to continue to get her to come back and buy. And we do that through, technology, but we also do it through tactics like top customer gifting, VIP sampling, consumer panels, consumer sampling to people who are not our customers. So there's a lot of ways you can, and I thought it was interesting in the gifting panel yesterday, someone mentioned doing VIP gifting and then measuring it against a cohort, right? So I think there's a lot of ways you can touch customers beyond the typical like cart abandon, order confirm, shipping, there's a lot of ways. And also we're doing some live selling, which does drive sales, but it's also a way to engage with our customers and create a relationship with them that is different than they can get with any other channel in which we sell. And I know you sell in other channels too, so it's always finding this way to differentiate our own direct-to-consumer experience from other places. So there's a lot of things you can do. I think you have to kind of figure out what works for your brand and then start to try some things.
Okay. I'm actually going to shift the topic a little bit because I know we don't have a lot of time, and there's something really meaty that we want to get into, unless there's anything else you wanted to say, Daren.
No. Go ahead.
Okay. So let's shift a little bit and talk about the headwinds that are out there right now as it relates to the marketplace, regardless of what industry you're in, right? I mean, I sit on a couple of public boards, and I also, advise a number of companies. Everyone's sort of doing this, in terms of figuring out exactly what their estimates for the rest of the year are going to be based on, the fears of inflation, and prices, and gas prices, and all those sorts of things. So, based on these economic headwinds, how are you, sort of gearing up and planning with your respective brands?
So I try to keep it simple. I was joking with Bree, who's sitting over there, before, that I always have like one old marketing 101 thing that I try to bring up, and one is like the rule of sevens. And now we could argue about whether that's the right thing or not, but that a customer needs to see, or a consumer needs to see your brand 7 times before they're really interested in buying. I think particularly, I have a view across a larger organization, but when I was spending a lot of time in digital, you have a tendency to think you have to generate all 7 of those touches yourself. You don't. It could be lots of different things, a lot of leverage in your PR departments, getting your product development people out there to talk, using physical stores, using anything that you can get your hands on. You just need to get to 7 and just play simple games of like, how do I get to 7 in this current environment? So it may be sweepstakes that you're out trying to collect email lists. You know, it's not a super high quality email list, but those are touches, right? So how are you trying to vary what you put in? So it's know who your customer is, understand what the goals that you want to get out of it, and then start inviting the rest of the organization in to help you. And the rest of the organization could be a really broad swath of things. It could be a partner like Wunderkind, where we're using to do marketing automation. And so as somebody leaves something abandoned in a cart, or we try to do a sign up with some follow-on flow, those are things that are being automated away from your team. It may be working with our stores. So when the pandemic happened, we're on a pretty typical retail fiscal calendar. So we had just come into our new fiscal year, and then like a month later, we threw all the plans out the window. That's tough when you have a lot of physical stores. So we started going, okay, well, you're big on measuring things, Daren. What do you want us to pay attention to? And I said, okay, I'm going to cut you a list of your top 100 most valuable customers in the store. Like, I don't care how you reach out to them or how you talk to them, just make sure that you keep them engaged with the brand as we go through the pandemic. That's a way that we can use people who are out in the field to have another touch. That just counts as one of your 7. So just think through where are the areas where people can see you, where they can get a touch on your brand to try to keep that momentum going. That's important whether you have a big team, a little team, whether acquisition costs are high or low, but like squeeze in and get real deep so you can just power through impressions. And that way you can figure out if things are working or not, just by making big movements in one specific segment.
So let's talk a little bit more about customer acquisition costs and just marketing expenses in general, and the fact that if all of us that have budgets that are focused on consumer and brand, we're holding on to them. They're being pressured, right, as companies are looking to perhaps shave costs. So how do you reconcile that, particularly when you have such a strong, let's say, performance marketing engine that is moving and you don't want to necessarily slow those things down? So is there points of view about how you continue to drive customer obsession, but at the same time be financially prudent? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think Scott hit the nail on the head when he said, we're all seeing rising CACs, rising costs in customer acquisition, and how are we going to get people who are in the fold more engaged, right? I mean, the reality is that we are looking at these business headwinds. And I think as a leader, we have to really sort of take the emotion out of that and say, listen, this is a business cycle, and these happen. What can we do to kind of remain, to either grow or maintain during this time? I was talking to someone yesterday from California who said the gallon, prices of gas is like $7 a gallon. Like, it doesn't matter what economic level you're at, that hurts, right? So what are the 1 or 2 things about your brand that are going to keep people interested and focused on purchasing from you during this time, I think is what's important to think about. And then how do you continue to reach out to those top customers and keep them engaged and motivated during a period of time that could be a little bumpy, and then, the marketer in me says, it might be a time to kind of push a little more on some things around acquisition as other people are not. I think you have to continuously be testing and trying things, but also leaning into what works, right? So you have a customer base. How can you really engender more sales from that group? I think becomes critical.
Oh.
So I think there are 2 pieces. I think that's a great point. I'm going to borrow something Andrea said when we were doing prep, because I think it's important, is when traffic goes down, you have less browsing. It means you have more people who are being focused on a specific set of brands. And I think there's an important piece, is just to remind people why they love your brand and why they want to shop with you. It doesn't take a lot of money to just remind people that you're a cool brand. Some of you have cool brands, not everybody. I'm not going to be specific, but no, just to go back to the beginning on it. I was gonna Also, circle back, I think a lot of people will be pressured on their marketing budgets over the next 3 to 6 months. And I'm going to tie it back. Somebody had a really good way of framing this. Yesterday, they talked about FOP, first order profitability. So we get bound up in looking at marketing dollars, because it's a big pile of money. But if you're really truly in the game of conserving cash, and you want cash flow, and you want your inventory to turn, not have a bunch of cash that's sitting in inventory, you want to keep the right parts of marketing revved up. And that means that you're going to have to do the pre-work ahead of talking with your CFOs to really say, hey, here's the stuff that's paying back on the first order, or whatever you want your FOP to be. And say, like, hey, why would we turn this off if we're paying back on the first one? It's keeping momentum in sales. It's keeping momentum in the algorithms that are keeping your visibility up. That this is a good way to kind of juice cash flow instead of just looking at it as a pile of money. Or else what you can do is end up kind of normalizing, but at a lower base of revenue. So if you haven't been asked for that yet, you probably want to just do that pre-work when you get home so you're ready to have the conversation on what blocks of your marketing are truly good attributable revenue that you're not going to want to turn off because it's going to keep cash flowing through the business.
And since we almost are at that point of wrapping, is there any sort of nugget like that you would like to end with, Andrea?
Ooh, tough. I think I love that idea of FOP, and I think that's really compelling. And I think there's lots of channels that there's some channels that are more profitable than others, and it may be time to shift more towards those channels in sort of the place we're at right now.